John, recently there have been a lot of critiques of business schools.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Given your experience, if you were going to start the John Mackey School of Business, what would you be sure the students were exposed to in that?
Well, first we'd have to change the name. I wouldn't be comfortable naming it after myself. And I've never been to business school, but I have certainly met lots of business professors, and I've talked at least 15 or so business schools. So I've begun to fathom some perspective on what they do things. I do have some suggestions, if that's what you're asking. Well, I do think business schools have a tendency to select for and teach a certain type of intelligence, what I call analytical intelligence, which is, as far as it goes, valuable. And I'm not suggesting that's not important skills. It is important that people be able to think analytically, that they be able to logically analyze things. And so they do lots of case study analysis, for example. And that's just fine as far as it goes, but I do think the 21st century business school is going to need to evolve and understand that business success in the 21st century requires a lot richer set of skills. And if, not in any particular order, but some of the other skills that need to be taught in art are communication skills and primarily listening skills. I think those are essential skills to develop. I think emotional intelligence is, I always say that a better predictor of leadership excellence is less analytical skills than emotional intelligence, because a business organization is about relationships. And without a high degree of emotional intelligence, no matter how brilliant you are, you won't reach your full potential, and neither will the organization. And yet I don't think that's something business schools have focused enough on. They call that the soft side, and yet I think that's almost pejorative.
Oh, it is pejorative, yeah.
So
the real stuff's the analytical stuff,
yeah.
And the soft side of how you actually get people to work together to create value for each other.
Exactly.
That's
so emotional intelligence, social intelligence, communication skills, what I would call spiritual intelligence. And what I mean by that is primarily the ability or the skill set to be able to perceive purpose and meaning. That's actually, I believe, a type of intelligence that can be cultivated and can be learned. I also think it's essential that business schools what I call the systems mind. Again, analytical intelligence breaks things down into its parts, but there's a whole other way to perceive things, which is to be able to perceive the relationships that exist between things. That, if you're going to, in a larger organization, or if you're going to build an organization, you have to be able to perceive the relationships that exist, for example, between the stakeholders.
And how the whole context affects those particular relationships as well.
I mean, an analogy would be if you go to a medical school, the first class you take in your first year of medical school is you take gross anatomy, and you learn how you analyze, you take a cadaver and you dissect it. And you see the different parts of the cadaver. Again, analytical skills are important, but that's a dead cadaver. You're not seeing the relationships of how these organs interact with each other in such a way as to create health. And in organizations, there's a systems mind that sees how the organization flourishes and the relationships that must exist between these so-called different parts. Again, we're back to thinking in terms of synergies rather than trade-offs. The analytical mind is quick to see trade-offs. The systems mind is quicker to see synergies. And that's a certain level of consciousness that needs to be developed. And I think it's essential for 21st century business. My final point of what I would teach in those business schools is I do think ethics is extremely important, and I do not think people need a theoretical basis of ethics, but I also think they need to have that internalized, that we take that for granted. And our society no longer, for the most part, we're not in a religious context anymore, and ethics are something that no one is taking responsibility for. So I don't think people should be going through business schools without strong grounding in ethics.